Hey guys, tonight we begin a slow descent into the smoky, fragrant, quietly chaotic world of medieval cooking. A world where meals depended not on recipes, but on whether luck, the resilience of yesterday's embers, and whatever vegetables hadn't been stolen by goats in the night. And here's the soft contradiction. Medieval people lived in a harsh, uncomfortable era, yet their kitchens produced some of the warmest, most comforting food in all of history, simmered slowly over fires that never truly slept. Picture it, the faint glow of a hearth waking before dawn, the smell of damp wood warming into flame, the soft grinding of grain between stone, and a pot of pottage bubbling so slowly it seems to breathe. Warm air rising, smoke curling upward in thin ribbons, shadows sliding across rough wooden beams as someone quietly stirs the morning stew. But even in this gentle rhythm, one truth settles heavily. Most modern people wouldn't survive even one morning in a medieval kitchen. The smoke alone would chase them out long before the stew finished thickening. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to write in the comments where you re-watching from and what time it is for you. It is oddly comforting to know where everyone is drifting off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world outside is still blue-grey with early dawn, and the hearth is only beginning to wake. Before dawn settles into its full shape, the medieval kitchen lies wrapped in a blue-grey hush, as if the night still lingers gently along the beams and rafters. Outside, the world remains silent, fields resting beneath the last veil of darkness, the air cool enough to stiffen breath, the village still tucked inside its sleep. But here, at the heart of the home, a single figure moves with the slow, steady rhythm of someone who has woken before everyone else for many years. The hearth dominates the room, a wide, sooted arch of stone, stained black from countless fires that have burned before it. At this early hour the fire is not dead, only resting. Embers lie beneath a thin blanket of ash, faintly glowing like an animal curled beneath its winter coat. The cook kneels, her apron brushing the packed earth floor, and sets a clay lamp beside her, letting its gentle light spill across the stone. She begins by stirring the ashes with a long iron poker. Ash lifts in soft clouds and settles again, drifting lazily through the lamplight. Beneath the crust of grey, faint orange sparks twitch. She nudges them together, coaxing them closer, gathering their heat. Then she lays small sticks across them in precise, practiced patterns, thin twigs first, then slightly thicker ones. The kindling responds almost shyly, catching at the edges, pulling thin lines of flame upward. The first crackle of the morning fire sounds like a whisper. She takes the bellows next, working the handles slowly. Each squeeze sends a breath of air into the hearth, and the flames brighten, stretching taller, warming the stones that frame them. The heat grows gradually, pushing back the chill inch by inch. The stones above the hearth shift from dark grey to a faint reddish hue. Warmth fills them. The cook does not hurry. The fire cannot be rushed. Medieval kitchens rely on this single, living heart, and she knows from experience that patience creates better flame than force. Letting the fire die entirely is troublesome. Starting one from scratch means flint, steel, straw, smoke, coughs, and frustration. Any sensible household keeps at least a few embers alive through the night, guarding them beneath ash. If those embers vanish, the morning becomes much longer. The rest of the kitchen reveals itself slowly as the fire awakens. Wooden shelves emerge from the dimness, lined with clay pots of varying shapes. A mortar rests on the table, its stone surface worn smooth from years of grinding grain. Bundles of herbs hang from the crossbeams, their leaves dried into curled silhouettes. In the far corner, baskets hold root vegetables, carrots shaped like crooked fingers, turnips still dusted with soil, and onions braided together by their stems. Everything smells faintly of earth. Footsteps sound faintly outside the door, slow, measured, accompanied by a soft cough. A figure passes the kitchen, likely heading to check the animals in their pens. The cook listens without turning. She knows the sound, one of the older members of the household, whose joints creak with dawn as predictably as the floorboards. The fire gains strength. Small flames merge into steady tongues of orange, and the room begins to warm. The cook retrieves the iron pot that cooled near the wall overnight. Yesterday's pottage clings thickly inside it, barley swollen with water, slivers of onion softened from hours of simmering, the last scraps of yesterday's vegetables. Food rarely starts fresh in a medieval kitchen. Meals stretch from day to day, deepening in flavor with each reheating. She sets the pot on the hearth's outer ledge, close enough to warm, but not yet boil. As the heat reaches it, a faint, sleepy bubble rises in the mixture. The smell of barley thickens the air, mixing with the scent of smoke. A few rays of early light begin to slip through the gaps in the shutters. They fall across the floor in long, thin stripes, brightening the dust that floats in the warm air. The beams overhead remain shadowed, but the lower room shifts into a soft bronze half-light. The cook checks the wooden shelves, touching each pot lightly. Some hold dried peas. Others contain salt, precious, coarse crystals that feel like grainy sand under her fingertips. One jar holds bits of smoked meat, wrapped in cloth to keep insects away. These small stores represent security. If the weather turns, if the fields fail, if hunger creeps closer, these jars offer a bit of reassurance. She inspects a bowl of apples on the far table. A few are firm enough to keep. One has softened too much. It will need to be cooked today, before it spoils. Medieval households waste little. Food represents labor, and losing it means losing hours of someone's strength. A hen wanders into the doorway, clucking indignantly as though the morning's arrangements lack proper respect. She pecks at a crumb near the table leg, then flaps irritably when a draft of smoke reaches her. The cook herds her out with one gentle wave of her hand. The hen leaves a single feather behind, floating down in slow spirals. The room begins to stir more fully. Upstairs, a door thuds softly. A child yawns somewhere. Someone trips over something in the hallway and mutters under their breath. The household is beginning to wake in full. The cook reaches for the water bucket beside the door. It isn't heavy, but the water inside reflects the faint trembling of the firelight. She pours some into a clay cup, sips it, and then uses the rest to rinse the pot's rim. Water is carried by hand from the village well each morning, not freely available, not taken for granted. Every drop has a journey behind it. The fire's warmth expands, filling the lower room. Shadows shrink away from the hearth. The pot's surface ripples lazily. For a brief moment, the kitchen feels almost peaceful, as though time itself slows down to watch the flames settle into their steady breath. The cook wipes her hands on her apron again, though they are not dirty. It is a gesture of habit, a small reset before the true demands of the day arrive. Soon there will be vegetables to chop, grains to grind, dough to knead, animals to tend, water to fetch, tables to set. By midday, the kitchen will buzz with noise, knives against wood, voices calling for help, pots bumping against stone. But the earliest moments belong only to her and the fire. The medieval day begins not with the sun, not with the bells of the church, but with the quiet revival of embers, the soft return of warmth to a cold room, the slow persuasion of flame. Morning strengthens slowly, washing the edges of the sky in pale gold as the medieval kitchen gathers its first movements of the day. The fire glows steadily now, its warmth reaching into corners where the night's cold still lingers. The cook stands at the wooden table near the hearth, sleeves rolled loosely above her elbows, her breath calmer now that the flames have settled into a dependable rhythm. Soon, the rest of the household will need feeding, and the day's ingredients must be brought together before the sun climbs to high. The kitchen door opens with a soft groan, letting in a breath of cold morning air that carries the smell of damp soil and distant fields. A young helper steps inside, boots wet with dew, a basket held carefully in both hands. He sets it down gently on the table, brushing the chill from his sleeves. The basket is lined with straw and beneath it lies whatever the garden has offered this morning. Cooked carrots, some small enough to resemble roots rather than vegetables. Turnips of uneven size, a few wilted greens, and one stubborn onion with a green shoot growing triumphantly from its side. He shrugs and murmurs an apology for the onion's ambitions. The cook glances at it, amused, and cuts the shoot away with a quick flick of her knife. Vegetables never behave perfectly this early in the season. That is a truth everyone accepts. Another doorway rustles open. A second helper enters, carrying a wooden bucket filled with barley. The grain shifts inside with a faint, shushing sound. The bucket is heavy, and he lowers it carefully onto the table, exhaling through his nose. Barley is the workhorse of the kitchen, filling, steady, and forgiving. Wheat is reserved for finer tables, or for festival days when privilege briefly loosens its grip. Barley belongs to everyday meals, to stews that simmer 4 hours and settle comfortably into the stomach. The cook plunges her hand into the grain, letting it pour between her fingers in soft curtains of gold. Every handful must be inspected, tiny stones hide among the grains, remnants of the threshing floor. If they are missed, someone may crack a tooth at supper, a small injury that turns quickly into a great misery in a world without dentists. She spreads the barley across a cloth and begins to sort it with quiet focus, lifting out stones as small as lentils. A helper nearby comments under his breath that the stones sneak in more often than mice do. Someone else mutters that the stones are easier to catch. Their soft murmurs drift like warm air across the room. Outside the kitchen window, faint rustling sounds rise from the garden. The older man of the household returns carrying a handful of herbs tied in bundles, parsley, sage, mint, and a drooping sprig of lovage. His boots leave small clumps of wet earth behind him. He grunts that the rabbits have chewed through the fence again. No one is surprised. Rabbits are determined guests in every medieval garden, and the vegetables rarely win. He lays the herbs on the table. Their smell lifts immediately, bright, green, and sharp, cutting through the warm haze of the hearth. Herbs are not decoration here. They carry meals through long hours, turning simple grains and vegetables into something richer, deeper. A pot can taste entirely different depending on whether mint or sage is thrown into it. Herbs are the small luxuries everyone can reach for. A wooden jar appears next, carried by a young girl with both hands wrapped around it. She sets it on the table with a little thump. Inside are preserved beans, packed tightly and sealed under a thin crust of wax. She hands the jar to the cook, who cracks the wax open with the flat side of her knife. A faint sour smell rises, the unmistakable scent of beans that have been patiently waiting for their turn in the pot. They are still good, still firm enough. The cook nods and adds them to the growing array of ingredients. In the corner of the room, resting on a wooden board, sits a small selection of fruit, apples with bruised skins, a few plums that have softened slightly, and a pear that has started to wrinkle. Fruit does not last long in the medieval kitchen. The cool of the night preserves it only briefly. The cook picks up a plum, pressing it gently with her thumb. Soft, but usable. It will need to be cooked today. Wasting fruit is as regrettable as letting the fire die. Both represent resources that cause too much effort to lose carelessly. A familiar clucking comes from the doorway as a hen struts inside, convinced she is entitled to inspect the morning's preparations. She pecks at a stray grain on the floor, then lifts her head with an expression that suggests she owns the room. A child gently shoos her away. She resists for a moment, flapping her wings indignantly, before marching out with all the dignity she can gather. A single feather drifts down behind her, settling silently on the floor like a small, soft exhale. The kitchen grows busier with each passing moment. Voices multiply, low, sleepy, and warm. Metal clinks against wood. Barley scrapes softly against the cloth. Herbs rustle as the cook ties them into smaller bundles. The fire crackles with slow satisfaction, The cook begins placing ingredients into separate bowls. The inspected barley, now free of stones, carrots washed and trimmed, turnips sliced into wedges, onions chopped into crescent-shaped pieces, beans waiting in a shallow dish, herbs arranged neatly according to their purpose. She works without haste, but with steady focus. Medieval cooking is not a race. It is a sequence of small tasks that shape the day as much as they shape the meal. Each movement connects to the next, like beads strung along a cord. A helper approaches with a question about what the meal will be. The cook wipes her hands on her apron, considers the spread of ingredients, and replies simply, "What the garden allows." It is not resignation. It is acceptance, the kind taught by land, weather, and a world where food is a daily negotiation rather than a choice. A quiet joke rises from the back of the room. One helper mutters that last week the garden allowed more weeds than vegetables. Another responds that weeds are nutritious anyway. Their laughter is quiet, half-formed, softened by the steady warmth of the hearth. More sunlight spills through the shutters now, warming the floorboards and brightening the wooden table. The smokes drift lazily in the beams of light. The fire's heat thickens the air near the hearth, blending the scents of earth, herbs, and faint smoke into something that feels like the beginning of a meal, even before anything reaches the pot. Voices fade for a brief moment as the cook lifts the heavy iron pot, checking the slow bubbling of the reheated pottage. She dips a wooden spoon into it, stirs once, and tastes carefully. Not for flavor. The morning has barely begun for that, but for warmth. The pot hums with life, ready to receive whatever the household has gathered today. The kitchen has fully awakened now. The day stretches ahead, and with ingredients gathered in their quiet, imperfect beauty, the medieval meal begins long before anything touches the fire. In the calm ritual of bringing the land's offerings to the table, the kitchen settles into its morning rhythm, and the next task emerges with gentle inevitability, preparing the tools. In the Middle Ages, a kitchen's tools were never silent. They bore the marks of years of use, iron darkened by countless fires, wooden spoons polished smooth by thousands of stirring motions, knives sharpened so often their blades grew thinner with each season. These were not simply objects, they were companions to the daily labor, as familiar to the cook as her own hands. The cook steps toward the side table where the utensils rest. The light from the hearth glows softly across them. Heavy iron pots, a long-handled ladle blackened by soot, wooden bowls stacked neatly inside one another, and a set of knives that vary not by design, but by age. The newest knife gleams faintly. The oldest has a handle worn to the shape of the hand that uses it. She runs her fingers along the wooden ladles, checking for splinters. Wood dries slowly in a kitchen like this, where the air is warm and moist, and sometimes the handles crack. Today they feel smooth, warm from the nearby fire. She chooses the largest ladle and sets it beside the pot. The stone is smooth, dark, slightly damp from its last use. He takes the knife designated for the day's root chopping and begins to slide the blade along the stone in long, patient motions. Metal whispers against mineral, the slow rhythm filling the room with a steady hush. Sharpening a knife in a medieval kitchen is not a fast task. The helper works with deliberate care, keeping the blade at just the right angle, drawing it back again and again until it matches the sharpness needed to deal with stubborn carrots and thick-skinned turnips. The cook glances over, nodding her approval. A dull knife slows the day, a sharp one keeps it moving. She lifts one of the iron pots next, a deep, rounded vessel heavy enough to strain the wrists of someone unused to its weight. Medieval pots are built to endure fire, not comfort. The bottom of this one is rounded, to nestle more easily among the coals. Ash from countless meals lines the underside, dark and uneven. In larger households, pots hang from chains adjusted by iron rings, lowering them closer to or farther from the flames. But here, In this modest kitchen, the pot rests on the edge of the hearth, supported by bricks and the cook's understanding of fire's temperament. Wooden bowls and trenchers are laid out next. Trenchers are simple flat pieces of stale bread or wood, the medieval plate. They absorb juices, support vegetables, and feed hungry stomachs far more effectively than any fine dish. The cook checks each one, turning them in her hands. Some are chipped around the edges. Others bear faint marks from knives used too eagerly. She wipes them with a damp cloth, clearing the dust that settled overnight. Near the window, beams of morning sun catch a row of earthenware pots. They hold salts, dried peas, smoked bits of meat, small spare stores of grain. Each pot has a different shape. The taller ones narrow at the top to protect their contents from insects. The rounder ones cool more easily, storing ingredients that spoil quickly. One pot contains dried nettles, prickly when fresh, surprisingly nourishing when simmered. The cook lifts the lid and inhales. The dryness is perfect. Nettles will soften into the stew later, adding earthy depth. From a hook on the wall hangs the kitchen's only ladle with a riveted iron bowl. Heavy, reliable, used when stirring thick mixtures that threaten to resist the spoon. The cook touches the handle, feeling its temperature. Metal heats too quickly, so she sets it aside until the meal thickens. Outside, the faint sound of someone walking toward the well reaches the kitchen. Water must be fetched early. Buckets filled later in the day grow warm, and warm water spoils faster. Medieval cooking depends heavily on the timing of water, drawing it fresh in the morning, keeping it shaded, and using it before sunlight changes its character. The helper sharpening the knife pauses to test its edge. He presses his thumb lightly across the blade, careful not to draw blood, then returns to the stone with a determined sigh. The cook smiles faintly. Patience has its own sound in this room. Next she turns her attention to the mortar, one of the most important tools in a medieval kitchen. Heavy, carved from stone. Its walls thick and cool. It sits like a small well waiting to be filled. She lifts it with both hands, testing its weight. It has survived years of pounding herbs, grinding grain, crushing garlic into paste. She runs her fingers along the inside. Smooth from use, perfect for today's needs. She picks up the pestle, a rounded stone worn comfortable in the grip. This, too, has its own voice, a deep, muffled thud when herbs are crushed, a rhythmic scrape when seeds break beneath it. Medieval recipes rarely call for whole herbs. Everything is ground to release flavor fully. The mortar and pestle do the work that later centuries will give to machines. A faint clatter sounds behind her. The hen has returned, pecking stubbornly near the doorway. A child attempts gently to coax her out again, but the bird seems determined to claim at least one stray grain before surrendering the territory. The cook wordlessly steps toward her, giving her a look that even a chicken understands. The hen retreats with a noise that sounds suspiciously offended. By now the helper has finished sharpening the knife. He hands it to the cook, who runs her thumb along the side of the blade, nodding once. The knife gleams slightly in the firelight, ready to cut through anything the garden has provided this morning. The grinding begins next. The cook places some barley into the mortar, letting the grains fall in a muted cascade. She begins to crush them gently, combining force with rhythm. The pestle thuds quietly, rising and falling steadily. The sound blends with the fire's crackle, with the faint hiss of the simmering pot, with the soft voices of helpers preparing the vegetables. Grinding grain is never quick. It warms the forearms, stiffens the wrists, demands consistency. As she works, the cook breathes deeply, inhaling the faint, dusty smell of crushed barley. Some kitchens use hand mills instead, stone querns that require two people to operate. But here, the mortar is the easier tool, and the cook prefers the closeness it brings to the food. On the far table, the helper begins to chop carrots with the newly sharper knife. The blade sinks into the vegetable with satisfying ease. Carrot slices fall in bright orange coins onto the board, rolling toward the bowl waiting beneath. He flicks them in gently with the side of the knife, then starts on the turnips, whose pale flesh reveals a faint purple ring near the skin. The sounds of chopping join the music of the room, the rhythmic tap of knife against wood, the deeper thud of the pestle, the crackle of fire, the faint bubbling from the pot. A few jokes slip into the air with the rising warmth. Someone remarks that the knife is so sharp it could divide a hair. Another responds that it would be easier to divide his patience. Their laughter drifts gently, dissolving into the room like steam. The cook moves between tasks, checking the pot, grinding herbs, stirring the grain, sorting bowls, her steps coordinated by long habit. Medieval cooking has no written recipes. It has memory, experience, observation. If the fire burns too hot, she shifts the pot outward. If the mixture thickens too quickly, she adds water. Every action responds to the fire's moods, to the ingredients' behavior, to the day's temperature. As the tools fall into their roles, the room feels fuller, more alive. The kitchen's pulse grows stronger, the fire glows brighter. The air thickens with warmth and the faint scent of crushed herbs. The cook wipes her hands on her apron again and lifts the mortar one more time, inspecting the grain's texture. Good, ready for the next step. Everything is in place now. The knives sharpened, the ladles chosen, the bowls cleaned, the herbs tied, the pots warmed, the fire steady. The kitchen breathes with its tools, as though waking alongside them. And as the morning deepens, the quiet preparation gives way to the heart of the day's work, turning these ingredients, with these tools, into a meal shaped slowly by fire. The warmth near the hearth thickens as the morning deepens, and soon the fire reaches a steady glow that promises enough heat for the long hours ahead. Fire is not a stable companion in the Middle Ages. It shifts, it sulks, it roars, it withdraws. It must be managed like a restless animal, coaxed, fed, calmed, and watched with constant patience. And now, with the ingredients gathered and the tools prepared, the cook begins the slow dance of managing heat. She lowers herself to sit on a low wooden stool beside the hearth, the seat worn smooth from years of use. From here she can see the coals glowing like living embers of some underground sun, their edges pulsing faintly with breath-like warmth. She takes the hearth rake, a long iron rod with a curved end, and begins to draw the coals into small clusters. Some she pushes outward to cool slightly, others she gathers inwards to keep the hottest center alive. Each motion is deliberate, guided by instinct rather than instruction. The hearthstone beneath the fire radiates warmth that seeps into the floor. The air close to the flames smells of resin and charred wood. Smoke spirals upward in thin ribbons, curling around the blackened stones before slipping through the chimney's narrow throat. A faint breeze moves through the chimney, shifting the smoke slightly to one side. The cook notices this and tilts her head. She knows what it means. The wind outside is waking up, and the fire will need watching. Above the hearth, an iron hook hangs from a beam, sturdy, darkened, and capable of holding the heaviest pots. In larger manners, chains and pulleys allow cooks to raise and lower pots with precision, controlling the heat with impressive ease. Here, everything is simpler, controlled by distance from the coals and the angle at which the pot rests. The cook slides a few bricks closer to the hearth, preparing a resting place for the smaller pot she used later in the morning. The helper tasked with chopping vegetables pauses to watch her for a moment. The way she moves the coals looks almost like a quiet craft, the fire responding as though understanding her intent. He whispers to another helper that she can read flames like others read letters. The other nods, as if this is not a compliment but an obvious truth. Managing heat is more difficult than it appears. A cook must account for everything: the type of wood, the dryness of the logs, the thickness of the embers, the wind outside, the size of the room, the humidity in the air. Oak burns long and evenly, birch burns fast and hot. Pine crackles and smokes more than anyone prefers. Sometimes the fire needs feeding every few minutes. Sometimes it needs restraint, too much heat, and the morning pottage burns into a thick, smoky paste. Too little, and lunch arrives late and thin. The cook tests the fire's strength by holding her palm above the coals. She closes her eyes, sensing the warmth without touching the flame. Then she nods quietly to herself and adds a single log, not tossed in, but placed gently at an angle where it will catch slowly. A hurried log can spark dangerously. A careless one can smother the flame. Fire requires respect more than fear. The pot on the ledge begins to bubble with more confidence now. The barley within swells and rises, releasing a warm, earthy aroma. Steam curls upward from the rim, drifting across the cook's face. She tilts her head slightly, letting the warmth settle on her skin. The soft heat loosens the morning stiffness in her neck and shoulders. Another helper arrives with a small bucket of water, freshly drawn from the well. The water is cool, nearly cold, and beads of condensation form on the outside of the wooden bucket. She pours some into a clay jug and sets it near the hearth to warm gently. Medieval cooks rarely add cold water to a simmering pot. It shocks the food, dulls the flavor, and slows the cooking. Warmed water keeps the stew's rhythm unbroken. The helper steps back, wiping his wet sleeves on his tunic. He glances at the fire and remarks that it looks hungrier today. The cook smiles faintly and replies that fires feel the weather as surely as people do. A damp morning makes fire sluggish. A dry morning makes flames restless. Today lies somewhere between the two, warm enough to wake the embers quickly, cool enough that the fire needs steady feeding. She reaches for a small wooden paddle and uses it to clear ash from the base of the hearth, pushing it to the side where it cools safely in a pale, powdery drift. Ash is both friend and inconvenience. It insulates embers at night, but interferes with open flames by day. The cook manages it like everything else, in measured amounts. As she works, the room grows increasingly warm. Helpers roll up their sleeves. One of them wipes sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and mutters that the hearth is already pretending it's midsummer. Another replies that the hearth believes it runs the house, and perhaps it does. A small pot is placed closer to the flames to heat water for later tasks. The fire responds by licking the bottom of the pot in thin orange streaks. Tiny pops echo as sap trapped inside one of the logs heats and bursts. A faint smell of pine needles drifts upward, reminding everyone of the forest beyond the garden. The cook turns her attention back to the fire pit. She shifts the glowing coals again with the rake, creating a shallow valley of heat where she can nestle a kettle later in the morning. The movements are slow and precise. Each shift opens or restricts airflow, each change influencing how fast the fire will consume the wood. A hearth with too much air becomes frantic. A hearth with too little suffocates. One helper kneels beside her, watching. He asks quietly how she knows when the fire is right. The cook lifts a brow, considering. Then she simply murmurs that a fire speaks if you listen. The boy nods, though he understands only half of it. Experience is not easily translated into words. The fire grows brighter again. Shadows shift across the walls. The iron pots shine in the flickering orange light, their curved edges glowing softly. The hearth smells of damp wood drying into warmth, of faint smoke, of the earthy sweetness of the barley pot. By now the room's atmosphere has changed entirely. Heat gathers like a thick blanket. Voices lower instinctively, as though louder sounds might disrupt the flame's focus. The air pulses softly with the fire's breathing. The cook rises, stretching her back. She wipes her hands on her apron, then checks the pot again. The mixture thickens slowly, its surface rising and falling in gentle bubbles. She moves it slightly farther from the hottest coals, so it can simmer instead of boil. A pot left too close for too long risks scorching, and once a pot burns, the flavor clings for hours. Behind her, sunlight brightens through the shutters, casting warm stripes across the floor. Dust motes drift in the light, trembling with the faint movements of warm air rising. The cook steps back to admire her work, not with pride, but with quiet satisfaction. Managing the fire is the foundation of everything that will follow. With the right heat, even the simplest ingredients transform into something comforting, nourishing, and entirely expected in a world shaped by necessity. The hearth crackles softly, as if acknowledging her attention, and with the fire steady, with the coals arranged to her liking, with the room warmed and the tools ready, the medieval kitchen moves naturally into its next phase, preparing the food that will soon meet the waiting flame. With the fire steady and the tools arranged across the tables, the kitchen settles into the soft rhythm of transforming raw ingredients into something that will nourish the household. This part of the morning is unhurried, but full, shaped by the gentle choreography of hands, knives, bowls, and the steady warmth coming from the hearth. It is in this space that the simplest foods, vegetables, grains, herbs begin their slow shift toward becoming a meal. The cook gestures to one of the helpers, who brings forward the basket of carrots and turnips collected at dawn. Their skins are still faintly damp from the garden soil. The cook takes up the newly sharpened knife, its edge glinting softly in the firelight, and begins to peel the vegetables. Though peeling is generous, more often she pares away only what needs removing. Medieval kitchens treat food with frugality. Every scrap counts, and waste is a luxury no one can afford. The knife moves in quiet strokes. Thick carrot skin curls away in uneven ribbons, falling onto the table in soft thuds. Turnip peels gather beside them, pale and waxy. A helper gathers the scraps into a wooden bowl. Some will feed the chickens later. Some will be tossed onto the compost heap near the garden. The cook slices the carrots into rough rounds, some thick, some thin. Such irregularity is normal. Medieval cooking does not demand uniformity. The pot will soften everything in its own slow time. The turnips she chops more steadily, pressing the blade with firm hands, the pieces thudding against the cutting board. Steam curls upward from the pot near the hearth, as if watching the progress on the table. In the corner, the mortar and pestle wait. The cook adds a handful of garlic cloves into the stone bowl, smashing them with a slow, heavy movement. The pestle thuds rhythmically, crushing cloves into a fragrant paste. Garlic scent fills the warm air, sharp, earthy, and immediately comforting. Medieval kitchens depend on garlic and onions not only for flavor, but because they store well and grow reliably. Even the poorest gardens yield these sturdy plants. Near her, a helper chops onions, blinking rapidly as the sharpness stings his eyes. He mutters that onions wage war more fiercely than enemies. Another helper whispers that onions don't hold grudges, at least. Their quiet jokes blend with the fire's gentle crackle. The cook scrapes the crushed garlic into a small clay bowl and adds a pinch of salt. Salt crystals glimmer like pale gemstones, though in truth they cost too much to treat as decoration. A careful hand must measure them. She mixes the garlic and salt together with the tip of her knife until they form a coarse, fragrant paste. The barley, sorted earlier and freed from stones, waits on a cloth nearby. The cook runs her fingers through it again. Its texture feels cool, smooth, and comforting, grains shaped from the earth's patience. She scoops a portion into a wooden bowl and pours warm water over it, stirring gently. The grains swell slightly as they absorb the moisture. Soaking makes them soften faster once added to the pot. A deep bowl of beans rests beside the barley. The cook examines them, pressing one between her fingers. It is firm, but no longer rock hard. Beans require soaking, pounding, or long cooking to become edible. Today, they have been soaked since dawn. She nods her approval. A helper brings forward the herbs gathered earlier: parsley, sage, mint, lovage, all tied in bundles. Their scents rise immediately, weaving together with the aroma of garlic and the faint smoke from the hearth. The cook unties each bundle and plucks the leaves, setting them on a wooden board. Her fingers move quickly, sorting and removing wilted parts. She chops the herbs using a rocking motion, the knife clicking gently against the board. Bits scatter like green confetti. The room grows warmer, filled with scents that overlap gently. The sweetness of carrots, the bite of garlic, the bright sharpness of herbs, and the earthy smell of grains. Even the wood of the table releases a faint aroma under the pressure of knives and bowls. The helpers fall into their own tasks. One grinds dried nettle leaves into powdery flakes using a small wooden grinder. Another trims leeks, their green tops curling into spirals. A child rinses apples that will be cooked down later into a thin, tart sauce. Even the smallest hands find purpose in the kitchen. The cook moves the barley bowl closer to the hearth. Heat radiates across her skin, drying the droplets of water clinging to the bowl's edges. She stirs the barley with a wooden spoon, watching it thicken slightly. The grain absorbs warmth like a living thing. She glances at the simmering pot and lifts the lid. A soft wave of steam escapes, carrying with it the mellow scent of barley and onions cooked from yesterday. The surface shifts in slow movements, thick, almost sleepy bubbles rising and breaking quietly. The cook stirs, feeling the resistance of the mixture. It's ready for more. She takes the bowl of chopped vegetables and tips them slowly into the pot. Carrots sink first, then turnips, then the chopped onion that softens instantly in the heat. The fire responds with a faint hiss as a drop of stew falls onto a glowing coal. She stirs, folding the vegetables into the mixture. Their colors fade slightly as they meet the warm broth, blending into the familiar palate of a medieval meal. The garlic paste goes in next. A dollop falls into the pot, dissolving gently. Then come the herbs, parsley, sage, lovage, their scents rising as the heat touches them. The cook breathes in deeply. The aroma is rich, comforting, familiar. The helper grinding nettles brings the bowl forward. The green powder looks dull, but its flavor is surprisingly lively when cooked. The cook sprinkles it in, letting it disappear into the pot like dust into water. She steps back and wipes her forehead with the corner of her apron. The fire's glow warms her face. A line of warmth runs down her forearm, where steam curled against her skin. One of the helpers asks softly if the pot needs more water. The cook shakes her head. "Let it thicken first," she murmurs. "It will tell us when it needs more." Her tone is not poetic, it is literal. Pots in kitchens like this behave differently depending on heat, ingredients, weather, even the humidity in the air. She listens to them the way others listen to the sky. Someone jokes that the pot speaks more clearly than some people. Another adds that at least the pot doesn't argue back. Their laughter drifts gently, softened by the warmth in the room. The cook checks the texture again, stirring slowly. The vegetables have softened slightly but remain firm. The beans wait nearby, they will be added later, when the pot has grown more tender. Beans are slow to cook and stubborn about it. If added too early, they dissolve into chalky mush. Too late, they remain hard inside. The cook times them by instinct. On the far table, fruit is being chopped for the noon meal. Apples sliced into wedges, plums cut in halves, their juices shining in the morning light. The sweetness of fruit mixes with the savory aroma from the hearth, filling the kitchen with a scent that feels almost like a promise. The simmering pot thickens slowly, the fire guiding it. The cook places a hand on the side of the pot, testing the heat through its iron shell. Satisfied, she leans the wooden spoon against its rim and steps back to observe the kitchen as a whole. Ingredients have transformed. The raw is now softened, the sharp is now grounded. The cold has become warm under the fire's steady attention. The room itself feels fuller, shaped by the quiet determination of many hands. Sunlight filters through the shutters, warming the bowls and drying herbs. The fire brightens slightly, fed by a log added at just the right moment. And as the pot settles into its slow, patient simmer, the morning work blends into a single, calm breath. The vegetables chopped, the grains softened, the herbs prepared, the stew gathering strength for the long hours ahead. The kitchen's warmth grows deeper as the morning lengthens, and now the air carries a new anticipation. The quiet shift from vegetables and grains to the heavier, more deliberate work of handling meat and fish. In a medieval household, this part of the day unfolds with both practicality and care. Meat is not a daily certainty, nor something treated lightly. When it appears in the kitchen, it arrives with a weight of value and the quiet understanding that everything usable must be used. The first sign of this shift comes with the creak of the door. A helper steps inside, carrying a wrapped bundle in a thick linen cloth. He sets it on the table with both hands, as though it contains something more fragile than its smell suggests. When the cloth is unwrapped, the room fills with the unmistakable scent of raw flesh, metallic, heavy, earthy. A small cut of pork, salted a few days earlier to help it keep, lies in the center of the cloth. Not large, not enough to feed everyone by itself, but enough to add richness to the stew that waits on the hearth. The cook inspects the meat, pressing her fingers into it gently. The salt has stiffened its surface, but kept it safe from spoilage. She nods. A little piece will go a long way. Pork is a steady friend in a medieval kitchen, relatively easy to preserve, forgiving when simmered 4 hours, and rich enough to flavor an entire pot with only a handful of scraps. She slices a small portion, cutting thick pieces from the edge. The knife, sharpened earlier, moves smoothly through the cured flesh with a soft yield. The scent intensifies. A helper wrinkles his nose, muttering that pork always smells too proud of itself. Another whispers that pride is fitting for something so rare on an ordinary day. Their voices float gently around the table, softened by the morning light. The cook places the sliced pieces into a small bowl. The rest of the pork she wraps again, pressing the cloth tight before setting it aside in the coolest corner of the kitchen. Even salted meat must be guarded carefully. A warm day can spoil the edges, and a careless hand can waste what others worked hard to preserve. From a wooden hook by the door, another helper carries in a woven basket. Inside lies the morning's fish, 3 river trout, still cool from the stream where they were caught. Their scales shimmer softly in the light, tiny flecks of silver reflecting like wet stars. The fish are fresh enough that their bodies remain stiff, their eyes clear. The helper sets the basket down and wipes his wet sleeves on his tunic, muttering that the river's cold nearly froze his hands. Fish in a medieval kitchen just be handled quickly. Freshness is fleeting, especially when the weather leans warm. The cook lifts one trout, holding it by the head. The body bends slightly in her grasp. She moves it to the table and begins to gut it with smooth, efficient motions. The knife splits the belly cleanly. A faint rush of scent escapes, sharp, mineral, unmistakably fresh. She scrapes out the insides with practiced care, setting aside what can be used for stock and discarding what cannot. A helper watches with knit brows, fascinated. He asks if all fish are cleaned the same way. The cook answers quietly, explaining that river fish are gentler to prepare, while sea fish often require more salt and firmer handling. He nods as though receiving deep wisdom, though he may forget half of it by lunch. Once the fish are cleaned, she rinses them in cool water. The liquid swirling down the wooden bowl in cloudy spirals. Drops splash onto the table, glimmering briefly before disappearing into the grain of the wood. She sets the trout on a clean cloth and pats them dry. Fish will not go into the main pot today. Their flavor is too delicate to mingle with barley and beans. Instead, she will boil them later in a smaller cauldron with herbs and a little vinegar, creating a dish that can be eaten alongside the stew. On another table, a helper handles a small piece of smoked meat, thin strips left from a pig slaughtered months ago. The smoke has darkened the flesh, tightening it into something tougher, but deeply flavored. He breaks the strips carefully, setting aside splinters of bone. Smoked meat stores well, and every bit of it carries the memory of the smokehouse, the scent of oak logs burning low, the slow curling of fire around hanging joints, the long nights where the smoke creeps into every crevice. The cook takes the pork pieces she sliced earlier and drops them into the simmering pot. The stew hisses softly where fat meets heat. The scent shifts instantly, richer, fuller, carrying the promise of something hearty. Even a small amount of meat transforms the pot, its flavor reaching outward like warmth spreading through cold hands. She watches for a moment, giving the pot a slow stir. The vegetables swirl beneath the surface, their edges softening further. The barley thickens the broth, giving it a steady, heavy body that speaks of long cooking. She taps the spoon against the pot's rim and returns it to its place. At the far end of the kitchen, the helper tasked with tending the fish is over a small fire under a secondary cauldron. This fire is smaller, gentler, coaxed with thin pieces of wood that catch quickly. Fish prefer softer heat. Too much flame makes them tough. Too little leaves them raw. He leans close, testing the warmth with his palm, imitating the cook's earlier gesture. She glances over, amused at the attempt, but says nothing. Meanwhile, another helper arrives carrying a cloth bundle. Inside are the leftover scraps from butchering a chicken the day before, bones, bits of fat, a few pieces of skin. They are not enough to feed anyone directly, but they will make a flavorful broth. The cook opens the bundle and nods. Nothing in a medieval kitchen is wasted. Bones become stock, fat becomes seasoning, skin becomes richness. Only the feathers and the beak find no use here. She adds the scraps to the small part where the fish will be cooked later, allowing them to simmer first to create a fragrant base. The bones rattle softly as they settle into the warming water. A thin layer of fat rises to the surface almost immediately, shimmering faintly. While she works, the helpers scale the remaining fish outside, scraping tiny silver flakes that drift down like metallic snow. Chickens gather around them, pecking eagerly at anything that moves. One helper warns them playfully that the fish are not for them. They ignore him. The cook's attention returns to the main pot. She stirs again, lifting a carrot piece with the spoon. It bends easily under the pressure. Good. The stew moves toward readiness. She decides to add the beans now. Their softened skins look pale and swollen, ready to join the thick mixture. She pours them in slowly, letting them fall with soft plops. The stew's color deepens as the beans sink below. The kitchen smells now of everything at once: smoke, herbs, fish, broth, garlic, and the hearty scent of meat warming in the pot. It is a tapestry of smells, each thread weaving into the next. Voices rise gently. One helper asks whether the stew will be ready before the noon bell. The cook replies that it will be ready when it is ready, a phrase spoken with such calm authority that no one questions it. Another remarks that the pork adds a comforting smell, to which someone else quietly adds that comfort is often rare in their meals. A soft chuckle spreads across the room. The fire shifts under the pot, flames flickering with gentle enthusiasm. A log collapses inward, spreading glowing embers across the hearth. The heat rises more intensely for a moment. The cook notices instantly and moves the pot slightly outward, so it does not scorch. Fire listens poorly, but it responds well to firm guidance. The kitchen feels richer now, filled with warmth, steam, and the soft confidence of a meal taking shape. Fish waits in its cloth, bones simmer in their pot, pork melts slowly into the stew, and the air carries the deep, quiet promise of nourishment. And as the cook wipes her hands on her apron and checks the fire once more, the kitchen continues its transformation. Grain and vegetables softening together, fish waiting for a gentle heat, meat lending its strength to the pot, each ingredient finding its place in the slow rhythm of medieval cooking. The steady warmth of the hearth settles deeper into the room, and with the vegetables softening, the grain swelling, and the meat beginning to melt into the broth, the kitchen shifts toward another subtle but important element of medieval cooking: seasoning. Spices, herbs, and all the quiet touches that transform a simple pot of food into something layered with comfort. In the Middle Ages, these flavors ranged from the humble grown just outside the door to the rare and astonishing, carried across continents along trade routes that stretched farther than most villagers would ever walk in their lifetimes. The cook stands at the spice shelf now, a modest wooden board set into the wall, holding a handful of small earthenware jars. Their lids are tied down with cloth and twine to keep insects out and scents in. She unties the first jar and lifts the cloth. A warm aroma rises, dried thyme, its scent sharp but familiar. She pinches a few leaves between her fingers, rolling them gently. They crumble easily, good, fresh enough for today's stew. She sprinkles the thyme over the pot, letting the flakes fall like green dust onto the simmering surface. The heat immediately releases the herb's fragrance, lifting it into the air where it mingles with the mellow scent of barley and the soft richness of meat. The pot sighs, as though absorbing the new note with gratitude. In a small household like this, spices are few and carefully guarded. Most of what flavors the pot comes from the kitchen garden: parsley, sage, thyme, mint, lovage. These herbs grow obediently, needing only soil, sun, and time. The cook reaches now for a bundle of dried sage leaves, rubbing them lightly between her palms over the pot. The crushed leaves fall in uneven slivers. Sage carries a bittersweet earthiness that settles well into long-cooked stews, grounding the flavors. A helper, watching her movements, asks if sage makes food last longer. The cook considers before answering. Some herbs do have a humility that keeps food from spoiling too quickly, especially when cooked slowly. But more than that, herbs remind the stew of the world outside the kitchen, the gardens, the soil, the seasons moving quietly beyond the walls. On the far side of the spice shelf sit the more precious jars, the ones wrapped with an extra layer of cloth. These contain spices that traveled from distant lands: peppercorns dark at midnight, cinnamon curled like bark scrolls, cloves shaped like tiny nails with sharp perfume, and a few red threads of saffron, so costly that they are used as sparingly as gold leaf. The cook touches these jars, but does not open them. Today's meal doesn't call for such rare flavors. Only on feast days, or when a visitor of rank joins the table, would such treasures be added. Pepper, especially, is valued enough to be counted bead by bead. A single spoonful could buy a chicken. No one wastes pepper. Still, the helpers glance at the jars with reverence, knowing that such spices exist in their kitchen brings a shimmer of distant worlds, caravans crossing deserts, merchants bartering in noisy markets, ships moving across sunlit harbors. The spices sit quietly on their shelf, reminders that even in this small home, the world has a way of sending gifts from far beyond the village. Closer at hand, the cook lifts the jar of mustard seeds. They rattle softly like tiny stones. She pours some into her palm and warms them near the fire for a breath or two. Heat awakens their flavor. Then she crushes them with the side of her knife, leaning her weight gently as the seeds crack open. Their scent rises sharply, making one helper wrinkle his nose in surprise. Mustard is a bold flavor, a spark of heat in a world that knows little of fiery food. The cook sprinkles the crushed seeds into the stew, just enough to brighten the broth. Beside her, a young girl grinds dried mint leaves in a small mortar. The leaves crackle under the pestle, turning into green dust that smells cool and fresh. She hesitates, unsure if mint belongs in the pot. The cook shakes her head softly. Mint is for the fish, not the stew. The girl nods and sets the crushed mint aside, her face flushed with the heat radiating from the hearth. The pot continues to bubble, absorbing each new flavor slowly. Steam rises in gentle streams. The cook lowers her face toward it briefly, inhaling the scent. She doesn't need to taste it to know how it's coming together. The aroma itself tells the story, the heaviness of barley softened by herbs, the meat melting gently, the echo of garlic lingering beneath it all. From the corner, the helper tending the fish returns with a small bowl of vinegar. Fish cooks best with a touch of acidity, something to sharpen its delicate sweetness. The vinegar smells faintly of apples. It was made last autumn, when the orchard produced more fruit than the household could eat fresh. The cook pours a little into the fish pot, stirring it with a wooden spoon. She adds mint dust, then a sprig of parsley for good measure. The broth begins to shimmer with promise. The helper watches the fish turn slightly opaque at the edges. He asks whether fish cooks faster than meat. The cook tells him that fish is a gentle creature in the pot, tender and quick to flake. Meat demands hours, sometimes days. Fish yields in moments. At the main hearth, the stew thickens. The cook presses the back of her spoon along the inside of the pot, feeling how smoothly it drags. The barley has released its starch, binding everything together. The vegetables have softened into the broth, giving it weight. The pork pieces have released their fat, shimmering across the surface before sinking back into the mixture. The helpers begin to hum softly, a tune that drifts through the warm air without form or direction. The kitchen feels almost drowsy with heat and scent. Even the fire crackles in a slower rhythm, as though lulled by the simmering pots. The cook steps back to inspect her work. She lifts a small pinch of salt between her fingers and lets it fall into the pot. The crystals dissolve at once. Another sprinkle of herbs follows, not for flavor so much as for scent, which fills the room with a calm green sharpness. Someone jokes quietly that the stew smells rich enough to fool a nobleman. Another whispers that nobles wouldn't know what good stew tasted like anyway. Their soft laughter ripples across the room, caught briefly in the glow of the hearth. The pots bubble quietly, the stew deepening in color, the fish turning tender in its broth, the air thick with the comfort of warm herbs and slow cooking. This is the moment in a medieval kitchen when time softens, when the fire steadies, when the ingredients settle into their places. Nothing more is rushed. Flavor grows slowly, leaning into the warmth. The cook folds her hands, allowing herself one long breath of satisfaction. The herbs have spoken, the spices have stayed where they belong, and the meal, shaped by the day's offerings, moves gently toward readiness under the watchful flame. As the morning deepens and the steady simmer of the stew fills the kitchen with thick, comforting air, the center of medieval cooking reveals itself, the pottage. This humble, endlessly adaptable stew sits at the heart of daily life, as constant as the rising sun and as changeable as the weather. It is the dish that holds the memory of every ingredient added to it, the warmth of every fire that has touched its pot, and the rhythm of every hand that has stirred it. The pottage pot dominates the hearth, heavy and rounded, its iron walls darkened by years of heat. Inside, the mixture moves with slow, thick waves, barley swollen to plump softness, vegetables melting into one another, and bits of salted pork giving the broth a quiet depth. The bubbles rise lazily, breaking on the surface like soft exhalations. The scent is warm and earthy, rich without luxury. In medieval homes, pottage is not a meal prepared and finished within a few hours. It is a companion that continues from one day to the next, always changing, yet always familiar. Yesterday's barley becomes today's base. Last night's leftovers become the morning's warmth. Whatever the household can spare, a carrot, a handful of herbs, half an onion, a bit of meat, or sometimes nothing at all, finds its way into the pot. The cook stands before it now, stirring with a long-handled wooden spoon. Each rotation of her wrist folds the ingredients together, coaxing the barley to mingle with the vegetables, encouraging the flavors to blend. The heat rises from the potting waves, brushing her cheeks and moistening her eyelashes. She lifts the spoon and lets the stew cascade back into the pot. The texture is thick, not heavy, good. It has reached the point where it will nourish more than fill. A helper approaches with a wooden bowl containing a few wilted greens, beet leaves trimmed from yesterday's harvest, still edible though softened. The cook nods, and he tips them into the pot. They sink quickly, vanishing into the stew's murky surface. Greens bring a quiet brightness to pottage, a faint sharpness that lightens the heavier flavors of barley and pork. Nearby, another helper stands with a cracked clay bowl holding a handful of dried peas. They look small and unassuming, their pale skins wrinkled. But peas are steady friends of the pot, turning soft and creamy after hours of slow heat. The cook taps the bowl, signaling him to add them in. He pours them carefully, then stirs with an awkward grip, trying not to splash the bubbling stew. His knuckles brush the rising steam, and he pulls back with a startled hiss. The cook chuckles softly. Steam stings faster than flame. A few steps away, the fish pot simmers over a smaller fire. Its broth has turned clear and fragrant, flecked with herbs, shimmering with fat from the bones beneath. The trout float gently within it, their flesh turning opaque. The helper tending the fish lifts one carefully with a wooden spatula and tests its firmness with a fingertip. It yields easily, fish cook quickly in warm water, far quicker than meat or vegetables. He lowers it back, letting it settle again beneath the surface. He glances toward the main pot and murmurs that the stew looks thick enough to stand a spoon upright. Another helper replies quietly that a stew capable of holding a spoon is a stew worthy of respect. The cook raises an eyebrow at their conversation, but says nothing. A thicker pottage feeds more people. In a world where food stretches as far as hands can make it stretch, thickness is kindness. A faint hiss interrupts the hum of voices. One of the logs on the hearth has collapsed inward, sending a shower of glowing embers tumbling across the coals. The fire brightens, flames flickering fast and high. The cook moves quickly, using the iron rake to spread the embers back into an even layer. The control of fire is never a set-and-forget task. Each hour demands attention. Once the flames settle, she shifts the pot slightly outward. Too much heat, even for a few minutes, could scorch the stew's bottom, and the bitterness of one burnt layer can stain the whole pot. She checks the stew again, dragging the spoon across the bottom to ensure it hasn't caught. Everything moves smoothly. The pot hums with warmth. Relief softens her shoulders. The pottage behaves today. Not every day is so cooperative. In some homes, the pottage pot never empties completely. At the end of each day, a bit of stew remains, thickened into a concentrated base. Come morning, fresh water and ingredients are added. The pot becomes a running journal of meals, holding the memory of previous days within its dark iron walls. Whether this household keeps such a tradition depends on the cook's preference and the family's needs. But today, the pot contains layers of flavor built over several meals, and its depth shows in the aroma alone. A helper approaches with a small wooden grinder. Inside it lie grains of coarse black pepper, precious, expensive, counted carefully. Pepper is not thrown in casually. The cook considers for a moment, then shakes her head gently. Not today. The stew is rich enough. Pepper will be saved for a day of feasting, or perhaps when a guest of standing visits. The helper nods, understanding the unspoken logic. Seasoning must match circumstance, not appetite. One of the younger helpers brings a cup of warm water to the cook. She pours just a splash into the pot. The stew loosens slightly, its surface smoothing into a gentler ripple. Water is both the simplest and most vital element in the kitchen. It carries flavor, softens grain, and stretches the meal further when more mouths arrive than expected. Voices rise and fall softly around the kitchen. One helper hums an old tune, a melody used to time the grinding of grain. Another tells a quiet story about a fox he saw near the forest edge. The warmth of the room draws conversation naturally. Though no one speaks loudly, the fire demands a certain reverence. A hen pokes her head through the doorway again, eyeing the stew pot with obvious interest. A helper shoos her away gently, promising under his breath that she get the peels later. The hen leaves reluctantly, scratching once at the threshold in protest. The cook ladles a small amount of the stew into a bowl to test its thickness. She tilts the bowl back and forth, watching how slowly the liquid shifts. Perfect. The vegetables hold their shape. The barley is tender. The meat's fat glistens faintly across the top, and the herbs have dissolved into the mixture, leaving only their aroma behind. She returns the test bowl to the pot, stirring it once more. The stew has reached its ideal state. Not too thin, not too heavy, rich, but not overwhelming. a balancing act achieved through patience and instinct rather than measurement. The fish pot bubbles softly, signaling its own readiness. The helper tending it lowers the flame slightly. The trout drift lazily in the broth, their skins curling gently. The vinegar has given the broth a brightness that rises with the steam. Two meals now work in tandem, the hearty pottage in the main hearth and the delicate fish simmering nearby. Together they create a balance of flavors that will satisfy the household when midday arrives. The kitchen feels settled, almost peaceful. The fire burns strong but steady. Steam drifts in long ribbons across the ceiling. The stew thickens with quiet confidence. The fish rests delicately in its broth. Voices murmur in soft rhythm. For a few moments, the entire room seems to breathe with the pots, the stones, the fire, all moving in harmony. And as the cook places the lid back on the pottage pot and wipes her hands on her apron, the morning's work settles into a gentle lull. The pottage is ready for its long, slow simmer, the part of the day where it needs no coaxing, only time. With the pottage settling into its slow, steady simmer and the fish resting in its delicate broth, the next part of the medieval kitchen awakens with a quieter kind of purpose, the preparation of bread and the small simple baked goods that accompany a common household meal. Bread, in all its forms, is the steady anchor of the medieval diet. For some families, it is the largest part of any meal. For others, it is the comforting presence beside the stew that makes the meal feel whole. In this home, bread begins not with flour in a bowl, but with the warm corner of the kitchen, where yesterday's dough sits beneath a cloth, resting like a sleeping creature. The cook lifts the linen, revealing a rounded mass of dough, now slightly risen, its surface dotted with tiny bubbles. It carries a faint sour smell, not unpleasant, but alive, the scent of yeast cultivated slowly over time. Medieval kitchens rely on these sour starters rather than packaged leaven. Bread grows from what came before. She presses her palm lightly into the dough. It gives under her touch with the slow, elastic softness of something waking from dream. She folds it once, twice, gathering its edges inward. The movement releases a deeper aroma, earthy, grainy, warm. A helper brings a bowl of coarse flour milled the night before. It is darker than modern flour, flecked with bits of bran. The grain used to make it was ground between stone wheels, leaving a slightly uneven texture. The cook sprinkles a handful over the table, letting the flour fall in a soft cloud. It settles gently, dusting the wood in pale powder. She turns the dough onto the flour table and begins to knead. Her hands press and fold, press and fold. The dough stretches beneath her palms, its shape shifting slowly. Each motion strengthens it, shaping its future form. The kitchen fills with the quiet rhythm of kneading, soft thuds, gentle compressions, the occasional creak of the wooden table beneath her weight. To helpers join her, each working a smaller portion of dough. Their movements are less certain, their pressure too soft or too strong, but the effort is steady. One of them laughs softly when the dough sticks to his fingers, tearing away in stubborn clumps. The cook offers him a bit more flour, wordlessly showing him how to fold the dough inward so it gathers itself instead of clinging. Bread, in a medieval kitchen, is more than food. It is time made tangible, gathered from days before, shaped in the present, prepared for the meals that lie ahead. The cook begins shaping small rounds of dough, flattening some into discs for ash cakes and leaving others in rounded loaves. Ash cakes are the simplest form of bread, dough placed directly on the warm stones near the fire, covered with a thin layer of ash, and baked slowly until the outside firms and the inside warms. They are not elegant, but they fill the stomach and offer a warming comfort to those who eat them. One helper forms a round cake to large, and the cook gently cuts it in half, handing him the smaller portion. Ash cooks quickly, she murmurs, to thick, and it burns on the outside before it cooks on the inside. He nods with serious attention, as though receiving a secret message. On the other side of the kitchen, another helper prepares a space near the hearth for baking. She removes a few warm stones, replacing them with flatter ones. The stones carry the fire's heat, radiating it upward in a steady glow. She waves her hand above them and pulls back sharply. Even without touching, the heat speaks clearly, perfect for ash cakes. The cook brings the shaped dough to her, placing each piece carefully on the stones. The heat kisses their undersides instantly, tightening the dough's surface. She covers them lightly with fine ash from the hearth's edge, ash that has cooled just enough to sit comfortably on top without burning. The ash seals in warmth, creating a tiny oven around each cake. Near the wall, a larger clay oven sits like a sleeping beast. Its rounded belly still holds the memory of last night's fire. Clay ovens are temperamental companions, warming slowly and cooling even slower. To bake a loaf well, the cook must judge the oven's remaining heat by touch, by the faint warmth radiating through the clay, and by how quickly droplets of water evaporate when splashed on its surface. She touches the oven's side with the back of her hand. Warm, not hot. She nods. Good for the smaller loaves. Larger loaves would require a hotter, freshly fired oven. Today will be a day of modest baking. She opens the small clay door, its hinges creaking softly. Inside, the oven glows faintly with stored heat. She slides the loaves inside with a flat paddle. They settle on the warm floor of the oven with quiet taps. The air inside is warm enough to lift the dough, giving it just enough rise to become soft and airy beneath its crust. She closes the door and wipes her hands on her apron. A helper asks if the bread will be ready soon. The cook shakes her head gently. Bread demands patience. It cooks in its own time, guided by the heat of clay and the slow breath of the rising dough. The helper nods and moves on to another task, understanding now that bread listens to fire, not people. At the hearth, the ash cakes begin to firm. A faint smell rises, warm, dry, comforting. The cook brushes away the thin layer of ash from one cake and lifts it with her fingertips. Its underside is speckled with dark spots where the heat touched it directly. She taps it lightly. The sound is hollow, promising readiness. Ash cakes do not mimic fine loaves, but they satisfy hunger with their simple, honest warmth. She places the finished cake upon a wooden board and reaches for another. One helper leans close to smell it, his eyes closing briefly as the warm scent reaches him. He mutters that ash cakes smell like the forest floor after rain. Another helper quickly adds that they also taste better than the forest floor, which draws a quiet ripple of laughter. The kitchen fills with the scent of rising bread, a warm, grainy perfume that gathers in the corners and softens the air. Helpers pause to breathe it in, their shoulders relaxing unconsciously. Bread has that effect. It reassures, grounding the day in something familiar and steadfast. Over by the clay oven, the cook opens the small door and checks the loaves. Their crusts have turned a light golden brown, their tops rising gently. She taps one with the back of her knuckle. The sound is soft, still needing time. She closes the door again. Bread is watched, not hurried. While waiting, she prepares a wooden bowl of flour mixed with water to form a paste. This will become tomorrow's starter. She stirs it with a spoon, listening to the soft, slurry sound. The starter will sit overnight near the fire, capturing wild yeast from the warm air, growing quietly while the house sleeps. A hen clucks outside the door, as if checking whether the kitchen remembers her existence. A helper tosses her a carrot peel. She pecks once and leaves, apparently satisfied. The dough inside the oven finally reaches readiness. The cook lifts each loaf carefully with the paddle, steam rising from their undersides as they meet the cool air. The crusts crackle softly, releasing a warm, rich scent that sweeps gently through the room. The loaves are imperfect, slightly lopsided, uneven in color, but they are alive with the care that shaped them. She places them on a cloth-covered board to cool, though their warmth radiates long after. Helpers gather near, pretending to be busy while their noses lead them closer. The cook raises an eyebrow, reminding them silently that bread must cool before cutting. Warm bread may smell heavenly, but it tears too easily. Still, one helper murmurs that patience is harder than hunger. Another replies that hunger sharpens patience. Their quiet exchange brings a soft smile to the cook's face. The kitchen now holds the full rhythm of medieval baking, the ash cakes cooling beside the hearth, the loaves resting on the board, the dough for tomorrow breathing undercloth, the air warm and fragrant with grain and fire. Bread and stew, the steady companions of ordinary life, move toward their midday meeting. And as the cook wipes her hands again, standing between the glowing hearth and the fragrant loaves, the kitchen feels complete, an entire world built from grain, heat, and time. With the bread cooling on its cloth-covered board and the ash cakes resting near the hearth, the kitchen eases into one of the quiet but essential rituals of the medieval day, stretching the meal. No matter how well the garden grows, no matter how generous the harvest was, no matter how many vegetables were stored or how many fish were caught, food is always handled as though it might be scarce tomorrow. The rhythm of medieval cooking is built on caution, on making little things go far, on turning scraps into sustenance and leftovers into comfort. The cook stands beside the pottage pot, stirring it in long, slow circles. The stew has grown thick now, the barley swollen to softness, the vegetables blending into a warm, hearty whole. The pork has released its flavor hours ago, leaving the stew deeper, richer, familiar. It's almost ready for the midday meal, but before it is considered finished, the cook must judge whether it can stretch far enough to feed everyone who will sit at the table, family helpers and anyone who might pass by with work to offer in exchange for a warm bowl. She lifts the spoon, letting the stew fall back into the pot in a heavy ribbon. Good, but perhaps the thick stew feeds fewer people. She reaches for the jug of warm water, pours in a small stream, and stirs again. The stew loosens slightly, still hearty, but more willing to share itself. A helper approaches with a bowl of vegetable scraps, the green tops of leeks, the outer leaves of onions, stems from herbs, bits of carrot too thin to chop neatly. The cook takes the bowl and sorts through it with a practiced hand. Some scraps she adds to the pot, letting them melt into the mixture. Others she sets aside for the chickens. Nothing is wasted, but not everything belongs in the stew. Another helper brings in a bundle of dried mushrooms, soaked since dawn in a bowl of water. The mushrooms are dark, their softened edges curling slightly. They smell of forest soil and cool shade, a scent that folds quietly into the pot, adding depth without cost. The soaking water, rich with mushroom flavor, is poured into the stew as well. The helpers watch as the pot grows deeper, richer, without needing more expensive ingredients. Medieval cooking thrives on this sort of quiet ingenuity, coaxing the most from the least, letting time do what money cannot. The cook dips her spoon and tastes the broth. It is steady, nourishing, familiar. She nods to herself. The pot will stretch. Nearby, the fish pot simmers at a gentler pace. The broth is clear, touched with vinegar and mint, the trout floating peacefully within. The helper tending this pot lifts one fish with the wooden spatula. Its flesh pulls away from the bone with almost no effort. He glances at the cook, who gives a slight nod. The fish are ready and will wait at the side of the hearth, warm but not boiling. The kitchen grows quiet in a soft, comfortable way. The fire hums gently, steam drifts in long, slow ribbons across the room. The bread cools, its crust crackling as it releases warmth into the air. The helpers slow their movements, sensing that the busiest part of the morning has now passed. One helper, a young girl with flour still dusting her sleeves, sits on a small stool and begins sorting the herbs that remain. Some she ties for drying, threading twine through the stems and hanging them near the window where sunlight will touch them gently for days. Others she sets aside for tomorrow's cooking. The rustle of dry leaves creates a soft whisper in the warm air. Another helper scrapes the table clean with a wooden blade, gathering the flour, crumbs, and vegetable bits into a small pile. He sweeps them into a bowl. Some will feed animals, some will be composted, and the rest thrown neatly into the fire. The hearth hisses softly as the scraps vanish into heat. The cook steps back and surveys the room. There is a kind of order returning to the space, the order that always appears after the morning-esque chaos settles, after the chopping, grinding, stirring, and baking have done their work. The surfaces are still warm, the air still thick with scent, but now the movements are quieter, more intentional. On a small shelf near the door, herbs hang in neat bundles. The mortar and pestle rest with flecks of green still clinging to their sides. The ash cakes cool beside the hearth. The clay oven radiates a faint, comforting heat from within. Everything has played its part, and now everything waits. One helper opens the window shutters a little wider. A breath of fresh air slips in, cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. It mingles with the richer scents of the kitchen. Dust motes swirl in the beam of sunlight like tiny floating seeds. Someone remarks quietly that the stew smells strong enough to draw birds from the forest. Another replies that birds would probably complain the moment they arrived. A joke that earns a soft ripple of laughter. The cook returns to the pottage pot, tasting once more. The flavors have settled into one another fully now. Grains softened, vegetables tender, pork melted into the broth, herbs weaving through everything. The stew tastes of home, of work, of patience, of every morning that came before, and every morning that will come after. She lowers the spoon and places the lid gently on the pot. The sound is soft, final, like the closing of a book. The pottage is ready. Now the kitchen shifts again, preparing for the transition from cooking to serving. Bowls are set out, wooden, some smooth with age, others rough with recent carving. Spoons are placed beside them, each one different, shaped by different hands over different seasons. A jug of fresh water is placed near the table. Salt is brought forward, though sparingly. Bread is sliced, though reluctantly. No loaf is cut without need. The cook moves slowly, carefully, wiping the table one last time, adjusting the pot's position on the hearth, checking the fish broth for clarity. Everything must align. Everything must be ready for when the household gathers. The fire settles into a quiet glow, its earlier intensity softened into embers and low flame. The air thickens with a calm warmth, carrying the scents of grain, herbs, smoke, and bread. The helpers gather near the table, waiting for the cook's word. For a moment, the kitchen holds its breath. The pottage rests, the bread cools, the fire hums, the air shimmers faintly with heat, and the cook stands in the center of it all, her hands still warm from shaping dough and stirring pots, her sleeves dusted with flour, her apron carrying the memory of the morning's work. The meal is ready to welcome the day. As the final moments before the midday meal unfold, the medieval kitchen shifts once again, not into haste, but into a measured quietness. This is when the bustle softens, the fire settles into a warm, steady glow, and the helpers gather their breath after a morning's labor. Serving the meal is a ritual of its own, simple, deliberate, guided by habit rather than ceremony. The cook moves first, as always. She lifts the heavy lid from the pottage pot, letting a deep wave of steam roll upward. The air thickens instantly with warmth and the layered scent of barley, vegetables, herbs, and the faint richness of pork. Even those who have been smelling it 4 hours breathe in a little more deeply, as though greeting something familiar and comforting. She stirs slowly, folding the stew from the bottom upward, ensuring nothing has settled too firmly against the iron. Her spoon moves through the thick mixture with a quiet, heavy slide. Bubbles rise from beneath and break softly at the surface, releasing small sighs of steam. This is the moment when the pot reveals its final character, hearty, warm, and steady. Nearby, the helpers begin arranging the bowls on the table. They place them in a simple line, nothing ornate, nothing decorated, just sturdy wooden vessels carved for usefulness. Some bowls show old burn marks from sitting too close to the fire in winters long past. Others carry faint knife scratches where eager hands scraped too vigorously. None match, yet together they feel like pieces of the same story. The cook steps to the table and begins to ladle the pottage. Each scoop is careful and even, ensuring that each bowl receives a balanced measure, some barley, some vegetables, some broth. The stew falls into the bowls with a soft, heavy sound, steaming gently as it settles. Helpers carry each bowl to its place, the warm wood almost too hot to touch. Bread slices are placed beside the bowls. The fresh loaves have cooled, just enough to cut cleanly. Their crusts crack softly as the knife glides through, releasing little pockets of steam from the warm crumb within. Ash cakes, humble but beloved, are stacked on a wooden plate. A helper flips one of them over and taps its underside, nodding with quiet approval at its hollow sound. The fish pot is tended next. Its broth is delicate and clear, flecked with herbs and the soft shimmer of fat. The trout lie within like resting shapes in a warm pond. The cook lifts each fish carefully with a wooden spatula so as not to break its tender flesh. They are placed gently onto a flat platter lined with leaves. A bowl of the broth is placed nearby for dipping or sipping. All the scents mingle: rich stew, sour sweet bread, herbal fish broth filling the air with an inviting warmth that feels like the quiet heart of the home. Once the food is arranged, the cook wipes her hands on her apron and surveys the table. Everything is simple but steady, the kind of meal that nourishes more than impresses. In medieval life, this kind of meal is the foundation of the day. Warm food that steadies the hands, strengthens the body for labor, and provides a moment of calm in a world that rarely slows. A helper pushes open the kitchen door. Warm air escapes into the corridor, carrying the scent of stew with it. Soon footsteps approach, slow, weary, hungry. The household enters the kitchen in small groups, each person washing their hands in the basin near the door before taking a place at the table. The basin water grows cloudy with the dust of the morning's work. The cook steps aside, allowing everyone to sit. Eating is not a formal affair here. There are no assigned seats, no elaborate rituals. People sit where space allows, sometimes fitting more bodies around the table than seems possible. A few younger helpers sit on stools or even the floor, their bowls placed carefully on their knees. A moment of silence passes, not a formal blessing, but a natural pause of gratitude. Then spoons dip into bowls, scraping gently along the wood, scooping the warm stew. The first mouthfuls are always quiet. Hot food softens tongues and spirits alike. Shoulders lower, breathing deepens. The warmth of the stew travels from bowl to hand to stomach with a steady, comforting heat. Bread is torn, dipped, softened in the broth. The ash cakes, rough and warm, are eaten with simple satisfaction. The fish, flaked carefully from the bone, adds a gentle, bright contrast to the heaviness of the pottage. Voices rise slowly, soft conversation returning as hunger eases. Someone remarks that the stew tastes richer than yesterday. Another replies that mushrooms always make the pot feel deeper. A younger helper jokes that if the stew gets any thicker, they'll need a knife to cut it by winter. Laughter spreads softly, warm as the hearth. The cook sits only when everyone else has begun to eat. She takes a bowl, sits near the hearth, and eats quietly. She tastes the stew with the experienced calm of someone who knows every step that led to this moment. While they eat, the fire settles into a gentle hum. Flames flicker lazily, softened by the midday warmth. The logs have settled into glowing embers, their reddish light flickering across the pots, the walls, the bowls, the faces gathered around the table. For a few rare minutes, the kitchen becomes a small world of peace. No one is grinding grain. No one is sharpening knives. No one is tending the fire. No one is fetching water or sorting herbs. Even the helpers, who rarely sit still, find themselves held by the warmth and the food. The meal itself moves at a calm pace. Wooden spoons scrape against the bowls in slow, thoughtful motions. Bread crusts soften in broth. Fish bones gather neatly on the side of plates. The familiar sounds of eating, soft chewing, quiet sighs, the faint clink of spoons fill the air with gentle rhythm. As hunger fades, conversation shifts to lighter tones. Someone recalls a fox seen near the stream yesterday. Another mentions that the apple trees look ready for picking. A helper worries aloud about the clouds gathering in the distance, wondering whether rain will reach the garden. The talk is simple, but it weaves the household together. Slowly, the bowl's empty. The stew has stretched perfectly, everyone has eaten well, and enough remains for the evening. Breadcrumbs lie scattered near the edges of plates. A few ash cakes remain for later. The fish platter is nearly bare, bones arranged like the delicate remains of a small feast. One by one, the household members rise, thanking the cook with quiet nods or murmured words. They set their bowls aside, wash their hands again, and leave the kitchen in small groups, returning to their afternoon work. The cook remains seated for a moment, allowing herself a rare breath of stillness. The heat of the hearth warms her back. The scent of stew lingers in the air. The kitchen, so busy earlier, feels suddenly large and quiet, but only for a moment. The afternoon will bring its own tasks. The fire will need tending, the pots will need washing. The bread remains must be stored. The herbs will need turning as they dry. And preparations for the evening meal will begin sooner than anyone expects. Still, for now, the cook lets the quiet settle, just long enough for her hands to rest and her breath to slow. The midday meal has passed, the hearth glows softly, and the rhythm of the day continues. The warmth of the midday meal is in the kitchen even after the bowls have been cleared. The air still carries the faint scents of barley, herbs, and fresh bread, though they begin to soften as the fire settles low. This is the quietest hour of the day, the moment when the rush of morning fades and the demands of evening cooking have not yet begun. In this calm middle space, the cook turns to the essential, but often overlooked labor of cleaning and maintaining the tools and the hearth that make the meals possible. The helpers gather the bowls first, stacking them carefully. Wooden bowls do not clatter like ceramic. They make soft, muted sounds, gentle enough not to disturb the quiet. The spoons go into a separate pile, their slender handles poking upward like stems from a bundle of plants. The cook directs them toward the washing corner, a simple stone basin near the door. A helper pours fresh water from a jug into the basin. The water streams down in a clear ribbon, splashing softly against the stone. It turns cloudy almost instantly as the first bowl is rinsed. Wooden vessels absorb everything: smell, heat, touch. Washing them is not about scrubbing, but about coaxing away what can be removed and leaving the rest to the air and sun. The young girl begins washing, dipping each bowl, rubbing it gently with her fingertips, letting the warm water loosen bits of stew from the grain of the wood. She hums a soft tune, a habit she has when working alone or when the kitchen has quieted enough to hear her own voice. The melody fills the space like a thin, warm thread, stitching together the scattered pieces of the room. Meanwhile, the cook turns her attention to the hearth. The fire, which only hours earlier roared with morning strength, has calmed into a shimmering bed of embers. The air near it vibrates with residual heat. She crouches and takes the rake, drawing the embers into a tighter cluster. This helps them maintain warmth without consuming more wood too quickly, a small but important economy. She removes a few burnt logs from the edges of the hearth, pushing them into the ash pile. Ash accumulates quickly in a medieval kitchen. Some of it is used for cleaning, mixed with water to make a simple lye. Some will be scattered around the garden to enrich the soil. Today's ash is warm and pale, soft as dust. She draws it into a tidy mound, using the flat end of the rake to shape the hearth back into order. One helper arrives with a broom made of bound twigs, sturdy, uneven, carrying the scent of the forest floor. He begins sweeping the floor, collecting crumbs, flour dust, vegetable scraps, and stray herbs into a small pile. The broom makes a rough rustling sound across the packed turf, steady and rhythmic. The sweeping looks simple, but there is an art to it. Sweeping too hard stirs up dust. Sweeping too softly leaves half of it untouched. The cook steps away from the hearth and opens the window a little wider. Fresh air slips inside, cool and faintly smelling of soil. It mingles with the fading warmth of the kitchen. Dust motes float lazily in the sunlight, drifting like slow-moving stars in a quiet sky. The breadboard is wiped next. The helper scrapes the crumbs into a bowl, tapping lightly to gather the last of them. Crumbs are never thrown away blindly. Some will be dried and used for thickening future stews. Some will be given to the chickens. Others may be eaten as is by a hungry child who slips into the kitchen later. The cook moves to the table where the knives lie. She picks each one up carefully, wiping the blade clean with a damp cloth. None of the knives shine. Iron resists polish, but she makes sure there is no lingering grease or food. A thin layer of oil is rubbed gently onto each blade to keep rust at bay. The movements are slow and practiced. Each knife has served her faithfully this morning, and each deserves this small moment of care. A helper holds the mortar steady as she scrapes out the remnants of crushed herbs. The stone bowl and pestle bear faint green stains, a sign of good work done well. She rinses them with warm water and rubs the inside smooth with her fingertips. Stone holds scent for a long time, but she does not mind. The mingling of herb aromas, mint, sage, parsley, feels like the memory of the morning. In the corner, the young girl continues washing bowls. The water has grown cloudy, so she pours it out the back door and fetches more from the jug. Fresh water glints briefly in the sun before settling again into the basin. She dips the spoons in, rubbing each handle. The spoons clack quietly against one another, a gentle cluster of wooden notes. The cook checks the clay oven next. Its heat has faded enough for her to place her hand on the outer surface. She opens the small door and sweeps out the remaining crumbs and bits of flour from baking. The inside is warm and dark, the smell of baked bread lingering softly in the clay. A helper dusts the shelves, moving the jars of herbs carefully to prevent spilling. He wipes the surfaces with a slightly damp cloth, removing the thin layer of flour dust that settled during the morning's kneading. The jars are returned to their places, mint beside sage, thyme beside lovage, dried nettles near the window, where air keeps them crisp. In the far corner, another helper sorts the remaining vegetables. Carrots that still look fresh are placed in a basket for tomorrow. Onion skins are removed. Leek tops are tied into a bundle to be boiled later for broth. A small pile of less fortunate vegetables, wilted, spotted, or broken, is set aside for the animals. Medieval kitchens know precisely how far each ingredient can be carried. The cook opens the door to the pantry. The space is cool and dim, lined with shelves that hold whatever the household managed to store. Dried beans in cloth bags, barley in a wooden chest, apples in a wicker basket, smoked meat hanging from the rafters. She checks everything carefully, noting what must be used soon and what can last another season. Preservation is always a negotiation between time and necessity. Outside, voices drift through the window, the sound of tools striking wood, footsteps in the yard, distant laughter. The world continues its work. Inside, the kitchen moves at its own thoughtful pace. The girl at the basin finishes the bowls and carries them to the table to dry. They glisten faintly with moisture before the warm air dries them completely. She arranges them neatly, stacking them by size. The cook looks over her shoulder and nods approvingly. The girl's face brightens at the acknowledgement, her earlier fatigue easing. One of the helpers finishes sweeping and carries the bowl of debris outside to the compost pile. The chickens follow him eagerly, knowing that vegetable scraps often come with such a trip. They cluck and hurry around his ankles, demanding their portion. He laughs quietly, scattering the scraps onto the ground. The birds descend with enthusiasm inside. The cook kneels to check the embers again. She moves one log slightly, keeping a thin bed of coals alive, so the evening fire will catch easily when the time comes. A completely cold hearth requires more attention and more wood, both resources better saved. She wipes her hands on her apron. The cloth is marked with flour, smudges of vegetable color, and faint streaks from stirring the pot. These signs of the day's work do not trouble her. They are simply part of the rhythm of the kitchen. The entire room now carries a feeling of gentle reset. The tools are clean. The table is bare but for the drying bowls. The hearth glows softly, the shelves stand in quiet order. A faint breeze stirs the herbs hung by the window. Time feels slower, the afternoon stretching before them like a quiet field. A helper sits near the door, repairing a frayed cloth with steady stitches. Another checks the baskets to ensure no rodents have found their way in. The young girl plats the strings that will tie tomorrow's herb bundles. The cook leans her hand against the wooden table for a moment, letting her shoulders drop. She breathes deeply, the air warm but no longer heavy, the scents mellowed into a gentle blend of ash, bread, herbs, and the faint sweetness of cooling pottage. The kitchen is clean, the tools are ready, the hearth is calm. The day's middle rests peacefully. Soon enough, the fire will be woken again, the pots will be brought forward. The evening meal will begin its quiet work. But for now, the medieval kitchen exhales, a long, patient breath, settling into the soft lull between tasks, the moment of stillness earned after a morning of warmth and labor. The quiet stretch of afternoon settles over the kitchen, a soft cloth, dimming the noise of the world outside and allowing the room to rest in a slow, steady peace. This is the hour when the sun leans lower, slipping through the shutters in thin beams that paint long, golden stripes across the floor. The air itself seems to thicken with warmth and calm, carrying the faint, comforting mixture of cooling bread, dormant embers, and herbs drying gently near the window. It is also the time when the cook prepares for the evening meal, a humbler affair than midday, but still shaped by care. Evening meals in medieval homes are lighter, guided by what remains from earlier in the day, the stew left warming in the pot, the bread baked in the morning, a few fresh vegetables, perhaps a piece of fruit if the harvest has been kind. The cook rises from her brief rest, ties her apron more tightly, and begins once more the quiet choreography of preparing food. She steps first to the hearth. The embers glow beneath a thin blanket of ash, warm but fading. With the iron rake, she draws them together, concentrating their heat. A few sparks rise, floating upward like tiny fireflies before disappearing in the dim light. She adds a thin log, dry enough to catch quickly, and leans close to blow gently. The embers respond, brightening, cracking softly. Within moments, the flame awakens, small but steady. Evening fire is not meant to roar. It needs only to warm, not to boil. The stew pot, which has been resting near the side of the hearth, is pulled forward slightly to catch the revived warmth. The stew inside has thickened while it cooled, developing a firmer texture than at midday. The cook removes the lid and stirs. The spoon moves through the mixture slowly, encountering softened barley, tender vegetables, and bits of pork that have nearly melted into the broth. She listens to the stew's quiet sound, not bubbling, but shifting heavily from side to side. It needs only a little water to return to the right consistency. She pours some from a jug and stirs again. The stew loosens obediently, its surface smoothing into gentle waves. Next, she reaches for the bread baked earlier. The loaves are completely cool now, their crusts firm, the shapes slightly uneven. She slices them with the long knife, each slice falling with a soft wooden thud onto the board. Bread survives the day easily. It grows firmer as hours pass, but dipping it into warm stew brings it back to life. A few ash cakes remain from the morning. She places them nearby. Their dry surface still holds the faint warmth of the hearthstones they rested on. A helper approaches with a basket of vegetables gathered from the garden. They are small but fresh, a handful of green beans, a few late summer peas, 2 small onions, and a single pale cabbage. Evening meals take whatever the garden offers, without complaint. The cook retrieves a small knife and begins trimming the beans. Their green skin snaps softly under her fingers. She piles the trimmed beans in a bowl and moves on to the peas, which she shells with slow precision. The pods open with a muted crack, revealing the tiny green pearls inside. The onions are peeled next. Their skins flake away in translucent layers, releasing a sharp scent that tingles at the nose. The helper winces as he slices the first onion in half. Tears gather in his eyes almost immediately, and he mutters under his breath that no enemy has ever wounded him as efficiently as an onion. Another helper, wiping down the table, remarks that perhaps onions simply like to remind people of their presence. The cook shakes her head with a faint smile and tosses the chopped onions into a small bowl. The cabbage is cut into thin ribbons. Its leaves curl slightly as they fall to the table, their pale green color bright even in the dim light. Cabbage is reliable, a steady vegetable that grows in difficult weather and keeps well into winter if stored properly. Its mild flavor softens when cooked slowly, a perfect addition to the evening stew. The cook adds the trimmed vegetables into the pot. They land quietly in the thick mixture, disappearing beneath the surface. As they soften, they will bring a bit of freshness to the stew, renewing it for the evening. Medieval households rarely cook entirely new dishes for supper. Instead, they refresh the day's main meal, coaxing more nourishment from the pot, without consuming more resources than necessary. While the stew warms, the helpers turn to other tasks. One cleans the table where vegetables were chopped, moving the scraps into a bowl for the animals. Another checks the drying herbs, adjusting their bundles so air can flow evenly. The girl at the basin rinses the last of the washing water outside and brings back a jug of fresh water for the evening. Even though there is no rush, their movements have a gentle purpose. The fire matures into a steady flame now, glowing bright orange around the pot. Soft crackles fill the room. Shadows flicker across the walls, shaped by the flame's shifting movements. The kitchen grows warm again, though not with the intense heat of morning. This warmth feels softer, more like a blanket than a burden. The cook checks the stew, tasting a small spoonful. The flavor is deeper than at midday, the ingredients having spent hours resting together. She stirs again, thinking briefly of the long chain of hands that brought this meal together. Those who planted the barley, those who harvested the vegetables, those who ground the flour, those who fetched the water, those who tended the fire. A medieval kitchen never belongs to one person alone, even if one person leads it. Outside, faint sounds drift through the window, someone splitting wood, a cart rolling over the path, the low murmurs of neighbors talking as they finish their work for the day. The world softens in the late afternoon, preparing itself for the quiet of night. A single hen peeks through the doorway once again, hopeful as ever. The cook nudges her away with her foot, and the hen offers a small complaint before wandering off. The sliced bread is arranged on the table. A bowl of fresh water is placed beside it. The cook takes down a jar of dried fruit, the last remnants of apples from autumn, and places a small handful in a bowl. Dried fruit is a treat in a simple home, but evening meals sometimes allow for small comforts. The fruit softens slightly when warmed near the hearth, releasing a faint, sweet aroma. When the stew reaches the right warmth, the helpers prepare to serve it. The bowls washed earlier are brought to the table. The cook ladles the stew carefully, ensuring each bowl has a fair share of vegetables and broth. The warmth of the pot radiates into her hands. Steam curls upward, carrying with it the layered scent of a full day's cooking. The household filters in slowly, footsteps soft, voices lower than at midday. The fatigue of the day shows in their movements, but their faces soften as they see the warm bowls waiting for them. Evening meals do not offer surprises or extravagance, but they offer comfort, and comfort is its own kind of luxury. The helpers sit where they can, some at the table, others on stools or benches. Bread is passed around, ash cakes divided. Someone jokes that ash cakes taste better in the dark. Another replies that perhaps darkness improves many things. Their quiet humor settles into the room, familiar friend. Spoons lift the warm stew. Bread is dipped. The room fills with a gentle rhythm of eating, slower than at midday, more relaxed. The warmth of the stew spreads through tired limbs. A few sighs echo softly, the kind that escape only when the body finally rests. The cook eats last, as always, taking her place near the hearth. She holds her bowl close, letting the heat warm her hands. She watches the room, listening to the low hum of contentment. Her work for the day is not finished. The fire will need tending again, the bowls washing once more, but for now she allows herself the rare feeling of pause. Outside, the sky leans toward dusk. The air cools, shadows lengthen, the world slows its breath. Inside, the evening meal draws to its quiet close, bowls nearly empty, bread softened at the edges, the fire glowing steadily, the kitchen resting in flickering light. The day has begun to fold itself away, but the warmth of the kitchen holds steady, a small refuge against the coming night. As the last spoons scrape the bottoms of bowls and the final crumbs of bread disappear, the evening meal fades into quiet satisfaction. The warmth of the kitchen are around the household like a tired but gentle embrace, softening voices and slowing movements. The helpers rise gradually, some stretching stiff backs, others rubbing warmth into their hands. The end of the meal is not a sudden event, but a slow exhale, slipping gently into the rhythm of dusk. The cook stands, her knees making the faintest sound as she straightens. She gathers her own empty bowl and places it with the others waiting by the basin. She does not rush. Evening tasks require patience, not speed. The fire glows in the hearth, low but steady, its orange light flickering across the walls in slow pulses. It is no longer the force of the morning, but something quieter, like a heartbeat cooling after exertion. Outside, a faint lavender color spreads across the sky, fading into deeper blues. The world cools quickly after sunset. A soft breeze slips through the kitchen window, carrying the smell of damp earth and the distant hint of wood smoke from neighboring homes. Chickens settle into their roosts, scratching once or twice before falling still. A dog barks somewhere far away. The kitchen listens, aware that night is drawing near. Inside, the helpers begin the washing again. The girl at the basin dips the bowls into warm water. The water, heated earlier, has cooled to a comfortable temperature. She uses her hands more than any tool, rubbing the wooden surfaces gently, ensuring no bits of stew cling to the grain. She hums without thinking, the same soft tune she sang in the afternoon. Her voice blends with the sound of water, forming a sleepy rhythm. Another helper gathers the spoons, laying them out on a cloth to dry. He wipes them carefully, running the cloth along their handles and bowls. The wood shines faintly in the lamplight. He sets each spoon beside the next, aligning them neatly, a small orderliness that brings quiet satisfaction. Over by the hearth, the cook tends to the pot once more. Enough pottage remains for the next morning's base, so she does not empty it. Instead, she stirs it gently, folding the remaining stew into a smooth layer. The pot will rest overnight near the lingering warmth of the fire, allowing the flavors to deepen. This way, tomorrow's meal will begin with something familiar, connected to the day before. She lifts the pot slightly, shifting it to a position where it will stay warm without cooking further. The iron is heavy. The muscles in her arms remember years of lifting weight like this. A helper steps forward to assist, but she waves him away with a tired smile. Some tasks are simply hers. A roaring flame would waste wood and heat the room too much. The cook takes the rake and draws the logs apart, spreading the embers into a thin layer. They glow like small red stones in the dimness. She covers most of them with a blanket of ash. Ash keeps the coals alive through the night, preventing them from dying, but keeping their heat contained. In the morning, she will stir the ash aside and revive the fire with only a few breaths and a handful of kindling. The hearth, now quiet and controlled, radiates a faint, warm shimmer across the floor. Shadows ripple around its edges, softening into darkness. The clay oven cools as well. Earlier, it breathed heat, baking the loaves that fed the household. Now, Its rounded shape sheds its warmth slowly. The cook opens the door to let out some of the lingering heat and to ensure no embers remain hidden inside. The air inside glows faintly, like a hollow sun slipping beneath the horizon. She touches the outer wall with her palm. Warm still, but not enough to cook, perfect for drying herbs overnight. She gathers the day's herb bundles, tying them more firmly, and hangs them near the cooling oven. Their scents drift lightly into the air: sage, lovage, mint, thyme. The warm clay pulls moisture from their leaves, leaving them crisp and ready for storage. Their faint rustling sounds like whispers, the last murmurs of the garden before night settles in. The helpers begin wiping down the long wooden table. The cloth sweeps gently across the surface, collecting crumbs and flour and tiny flecks of vegetables. The table has seen countless meals, each carving a faint memory into its grain. Even in the dim light, the marks are visible: scratches from knives, stains from spilled broth, burn marks from careless bowls set too close to the hearth. The cook runs her hand along the wood, feeling its familiar texture beneath her fingers. Someone sweeps the floor again, drawing the broom in slow, rhythmic strokes. The sweeping gathers the last of the day's dust into a small pile. A helper kneels to collect it into a wooden bowl to take outside. The chickens, noticing movement near the door, gather again in curious anticipation, though all they find is disappointment and the fading scent of the day's cooking. The room grows dimmer as the light fades from the sky. The cook lights a small oil lamp, its faint flame flickering against the wall. The glow dances softly across the shelves, illuminating jars of herbs, small bundles of dried roots, the mortar and pestle resting on their side, and the row of clean bowls drying on the table. She lifts the lamp, examining the shelves to ensure everything rests in the correct place. Order is important, especially in the dimness of early morning, when she will return to the kitchen half awake and need to find each tool without searching. She straightens a jar, adjusts the placement of a bowl, folds a cloth more neatly. Near the door, the girl wrings out her washing cloth and hangs it by the window. The evening breeze touches it lightly, swaying it like a quiet pendulum. She wipes her wet hands on her apron and sits down, stretching her tired fingers. The helpers begin to drift into light conversation, speaking in low voices so as not to disturb the mood of the room. One helper remarks that the weather feels cool enough for frost by morning. Another suggests that perhaps the warm stew earlier has fooled their bones. A soft chuckle circles the group. Fatigue dips their voices, but the kitchen feels warm around them, anchored by shared work rather than luxury. The cook reaches for the small clay jar near the window, the householder store of salt. She checks the level, aware of how precious it is. Salt preserves, flavors, and protects. It cannot be used carelessly. Satisfied that enough remains for the coming days, she returns it to its shelf with a careful touch. Outside the window, the last of the daylight leaves the sky. The horizon darkens into deep blue, then soft black. Only the faintest glimmer of lingering dusk remains, like a memory refusing to fade. The first star appears, small and cold, far above the kitchen's warm world. Inside, the oil lamp flickers softly, the hearth hums gently under its blanket of ash. The dried herbs sway, the quiet deepens. The cook ties up her hair again, though the day has nearly ended. She walks around the kitchen one more time, checking the pots, lifting the cloth over the bread, straightening the drying bowls. Her movements are small but purposeful, guided by habit more than thought. This is how she closes the day, piece by piece, gesture by gesture. A helper begins extinguishing the small candles in the other room. The hallway dims. The kitchen glows in its own soft pool of light, like a world floating in darkness. Finally, the cook lowers the wick of the oil lamp, dimming it until the flame becomes a faint, golden breath. The helpers gather their things quietly. One thanks the cook in a sleepy voice. Another gives a tired wave. They step out one by one, leaving the kitchen in her care. She stands alone for a moment, listening. The faint crackle of resting embers, the soft whisper of drying herbs, the distant sound of an owl outside, the sigh of the house settling into night. She breathes deeply, not with exhaustion, but with the calm satisfaction of a day completed. The kitchen dims into shadows. The fire rests under its ash, glowing faintly like a secret ember. The bread sleeps beneath its cloth. The pots settle into the hush of evening. The air carries the fading warmth of meals shared, work done, hands tired but steady. And as the cook steps toward the door, she glances back once, ensuring everything is exactly as it should be. Night has come. The kitchen, serene and warm, surrenders to the stillness. Night settles over the village with a softness that seems to wrap the world in wool. Outside, the last faint murmur of distant voices fades, replaced by the steady chorus of nighttime life. The low hoot of an owl perched on a barn beam, the rustle of small creatures stirring in the grass, the sigh of wind moving past shutters that creak gently in their frames. In the medieval world, darkness arrives not as a backdrop, but as a presence, a quiet visitor that shifts the rhythm of everything it touches. Inside the kitchen, the darkness gathers more slowly. The embers beneath their ash blankets still glow faintly, pulsing in slow breaths. Their dim light flickers across the hearth, brushing the stone walls with a reddish, uneven shimmer. The air is warm at ground level, but cool above, forming soft layers of temperature that settle like invisible blankets. The room feels smaller now, held close by night. The cook returns quietly, not because she must, but because she always does. The kitchen is her responsibility as surely as her own heartbeat, and she prefers to ensure that everything is settled before she rests. She steps inside with measured footsteps, the wooden door closing softly behind her. The oil lamp she carries gives off a pale, golden glow, illuminating only what lies immediately around her. Beyond that circle, shadows linger, patient and still. She walks first to the hearth. Kneeling, she brushes aside a thin line of ash to check the coals beneath. They glow like tiny buried stars, not too bright, not too dim. They will survive until morning, ready to be stirred awake with kindling. She draws the ash back over them gently, sealing them beneath their protective layer. A long day's fire deserves a quiet sleep. A helper, unable to rest without one final check, steps through the doorway behind her. He carries a small bundle of kindling, thin twigs, bits of bark, and dried stems. Without speaking, he places it near the hearth for morning use. The cook nods once, acknowledging his gesture, and he slips away again, leaving the kitchen to its stillness. The clay oven cools in slow, steady breaths. Its walls radiate the last remnants of heat, warm enough to dry herbs, but not enough to bake. The cook rests her hand lightly against it, feeling the day's memory fading from its surface. She leaves the small door ajar, allowing the night air to circulate inside and prevent dampness. The faint scent of baked bread lingers within, soft and comforting. She turns next to the drying herbs. They hang in neat clusters, their leaves curled inward, their stems brittle: sage, thyme, parsley, mint. The warm afternoon air and the cooling oven have drawn moisture from them, leaving them ready to be stored. She tests one sprig of sage between her fingers. It crumbles easily, perfect. She will store them tomorrow, when the morning's light makes sorting easier. On the main table, the bowls now lie fully dry, their wooden surfaces matte and cool. She stacks them quietly, careful not to make noise. Night has a way of magnifying sound, and even the softest tap can feel like an intrusion. The spoons are gathered next, their handles lined like small wooden soldiers. She places them in the drawer carved into the table itself, pushing it shut with a gentle motion. Her eyes sweep across the shelves, checking the jars. Everything stands in proper order. Grains sealed beneath cloth, herbs resting in clay pots, dried beans secured in linen bags. The jar of salt remains tightly wrapped. The jug of leftover vinegar sits in the corner, its faint, sour smell drifting only slightly into the air. Nothing is out of place. The kitchen has reset itself, ready for tomorrow. She takes the cloth from the breadboard and lifts it slightly. The remaining loaf sleeps beneath it, firmer now but still good. Bread at this stage keeps well, far longer than stew or meat. It will be sliced thinner tomorrow. Dipped into the morning's warmed pottage, she replaces the cloth, smoothing it gently with the back of her hand. Outside the window, the moon rises. Its pale light slips into the room through narrow gaps in the shutters, casting long, delicate beams across the floor. Dust motes drift lazily through those beams, floating like tiny ghosts suspended in silence. The cook pauses to watch them for a moment, letting the stillness settle in her bones. A faint sound draws her attention, the quiet drip of water outside, falling from the eaves after a day of warming sun. The drip echoes once, twice, then fades. These small sounds become companions in the night, reassuring in their repetition. The room carries the faint scent of the day's work, herbs from the drying shelf, smoke from the hearth, grain from the table, and a trace of stew resting in the pot by the fire. Pleasant scents, soft and lived in, marking the kitchen as the heart of the home. She lowers herself onto the small stool near the hearth. The seat is warm from being close to the embers. For a moment, she simply sits, allowing her shoulders to drop, letting fatigue settle into her limbs. Her hands rest in her lap, the long day's work echoing in their quiet stillness. A mouse scurries briefly along the far wall, stopping near the base of a shelf. It sniffs the air cautiously. The cook taps her foot lightly on the floor, firm enough to remind it of boundaries, gentle enough not to startle. The mouse pauses, reconsidering the adventure, then slips back through a crack between stones. She shakes her head with a faint smile. Even mice know a good kitchen when they find one. She stands again and walks toward the door. Before she leaves, she takes a final look around the room. The hearth glows softly, the bread sleeps under cloth. The herbs sway faintly in the breeze, the pot waits for morning. The tools rest quietly in their places. The kitchen breathes slowly, ready for night. She lifts the lamp and steps toward the door. Shadows stretch long behind her. The flame flickers once in the breeze as she opens the door. Then she pauses for a heartbeat, listening to the hush of the room, a hush shaped by fire, labor, food, and the steady rhythm of a medieval day. Satisfied, she lowers the wick, the lamp dims to a soft ember, and the kitchen surrenders itself fully to the deep, embracing quiet of night. The kitchen rests now in complete stillness, held in the tender hush that only deep night can bring. The last trace of warmth from the hearth drifts upward in a thin, sleepy ribbon, barely visible in the dimness. The air has softened into something almost velvety, warm near the floor, cool near the windows, the two temperatures blending like slow-moving layers of water. Everything that worked today now sleeps, the knives resting in their drawer, the bowls stacked neatly on the shelf, the herbs hanging like shadows by the cooling oven. The faintest sounds continue in the quiet, each one softened by the darkness. The steady settling of wood as the embers contract, the distant rustling of leaves outside. A single creak from the rafters as the house adjusts to the weight of the cooling air. Nothing urgent, nothing sharp, just the gentle reminders of a world winding down, settling deeper with each breath. In this dim calm, the kitchen feels almost like a living thing. The stone walls hold the day's warmth. The wooden beams store the memory of voices and quiet laughter. The hearth glows faintly, a warm pulse in the shadows. Even the bread beneath its cloth seems to rest, its quiet presence blending into the stillness. If one listened closely, it might almost sound as though the room itself is breathing, slow, steady, peaceful. The day's rhythm has folded itself away. The heat has softened into comfort. The darkness has grown warm around the edges. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more is asked for. Just the quiet, the stillness, the soft drift of night settling into place. And as the last ember dims beneath its ash, the kitchen slips gently into silence.